Pleased to open this important debate this afternoon as the convener of the Finance and Constitution Committee on the committee's interim report on the European Union Withdrawal Bill. This interim report is a culmination of the committee's scrutiny of the bill since the summer recess, through to the European Union Withdrawal Bills completing its passage through the House of Commons. Ultimately, the committee will produce a final report on the bill prior to the final amending stage in the House of Lords. Presiding Officer, I want to take this opportunity to put on record my sincere appreciation and thanks to my fellow committee members for the constructive and productive manner in which they approached their work on this bill. Their commitment to the Scottish Parliament and to the principles underpinning the devolution settlement have enabled us to reach a unanimous recommendations. I'd also like to record in particular my thanks for support I received during the committee's deliberation from my Deputy Convener, Adam Tompkins. I should also like to thank our expert advisers, Christine O'Neill and Nicola McEwen, for their input into the committee's deliberations, and our clerking team, led by Jim Johnson, deserve particular recognition for the outstanding support they provided. Presiding Officer, there has been much commentary and discussion on what the contents of the European Union withdrawal will mean for the devolution settlement in Scotland, indeed the territorial politics of the United Kingdom more generally. Without doubt, the bill is complex and frequently obscure in its meaning and purpose. To quote the constitutional lawyer Mark Elliott from Cambridge University, he said, "To say that the bill is Byzantine in nature would be to do a disservice to the emperors of Byzantium. The bill is unnecessarily complex, ambiguous and tortuous in both structure and drafting. Therefore, in scrutinising the bill, the committee sought to bring clarity to the implications of the withdrawal bill's provisions for devolution. In doing so, we've engaged with stakeholders from sectors that will be impacted upon by Brexit, with organisations from agriculture, environmental, fishing and education sectors, as well as with academics and constitutional lawyers. We've taken evidence from the UK and Welsh Government ministers and, of course, from the Minister for Negotiations and Scotland's Place in Europe, Mike Russell. Whilst the bill may be complex, there is no doubt it represents a fundamental challenge to the devolution settlement, and that the bill, as currently drafted, undermines the principles upon which this Parliament was established. There are various aspects of the bill which undermine this institution, but I want to confine my comments here to two issues, in particular Clause 11 and common frameworks. Clause 11 has been a significant focus of the committee's scrutiny, given the direct impact of the clause on the devolution settlement. In essence, the clause actually performs a very simple function. It removes the restriction on the legislative competence for the Scottish Parliament legislating in a manner that is incompatible with EU law. The bill replaces this with a new restriction whereby the Scottish Parliament would not be able to legislate in areas of retained EU law where such matters were out with devolved competence prior to the UK exiting the EU. The bill places no such similar restrictions on Westminster. In effect, the bill returns EU powers to Westminster, including EU competencies which fall within devolved competencies. Now, whilst yes, there is a process in the bill for releasing powers to Holyrood, where the UK and Scottish governments agree to releasing powers, there is no timescale in the bill governing this process. There is therefore no guarantee that powers will be returned to Holyrood. Presiding Officer, you know the UK government has produced a list of 111 areas where EU competencies intersect with the devolution settlement. These powers cover a wide spectrum of devolved competencies, from agriculture to environment, justice matters to onshore fracking, rail franchising to state aid rules. The evidence the committee took was remarkably consistent in emphasising that not only was Clause 11 undermined the devolution settlement, but also that it would result in a fundamental shift in the structure of devolution from a reserved powers model to a conferred powers model. Such a shift would inevitably create an increasingly complex boundary between devolved and reserved powers. Critically, witnesses stress that despite assurances from UK ministers that Clause 11 is intended to be temporary in measure, there are no provisions in the bill to this effect. Now, the Deputy Convener of the committee may disagree, but constitutional lawyers are not always necessarily known for the stridency of their position. Now, he may, of course, be the exception to the rule. However, that was not the case with regard to the views the committee heard on Clause 11. And I want to pick out just one quote from Professor Richard Rawlings of the University College London to give a sense of strength of view the committee heard in evidence. He said of the clause that the sooner of Clause 11 of the withdrawal bill is cast aside, the better. An unthinking form of Greater England unionism, which assumes only limited territorial difference, would be another way of characterising this. The committee has therefore been very clear in its view on Clause 11. We consider it represents a fundamental shift in the structure of devolution. Regardless of whether the Scottish Parliament obtains new powers as a result of Brexit, Clause 11 will adversely impact on the intelligibility and integrity of the devolution settlement. That Clause 11, as currently drafted, is therefore incompatible with the devolution settlement. That the clause is not a necessary precursor to the agreement of common frameworks. In short, the committee cannot recommend legislative consent to the bill unless Clause 11 is replaced or removed. In the report, the committee noted the statement by the Secretary of State for Scotland on the 6th of December that the UK Government intended to table amendments to Clause 11. Presiding Officer, if I can place my own personal view on record and state my dismay and grave concern that the UK Government did not table amendments to Clause 11 at report stage in the House of Commons as expected. The seriousness of the situation cannot be overstated. It is now imperative that the UK Government bring forward amendments to replace or remove Clause 11 at the earliest opportunity in the House of Lords. In other words, if a constitutional crisis is to be averted, it is vital that the UK Government brings forward changes to the bill that properly respect the devolution settlement. Presiding Officer, I also wish to comment briefly on the committee's recommendations with regard to common frameworks. Common frameworks is a term that can mean many things, but broadly it refers to EU policy frameworks that may require to be replicated at a UK level post-Brexit. Such frameworks could take a variety of forms, such as legislative frameworks or looser forms of cooperation from concordates or memorandums of understanding, or even a simple exchange of letters. These frameworks are necessary in the view of the UK Government to enable the effective functioning of the UK market. And both the Scottish and Welsh Governments agree there will be a requirement for some common UK frameworks to replace the EU frameworks post-Brexit. However, the Scottish and Welsh Governments fundamentally disagree with the UK Government on what the starting point should be for agreeing common frameworks. The UK Government believes EU powers should be repatriated to Westminster in order to provide certainty and stability to the UK Government, particularly with regard to negotiations with the European Union. Then consideration in the view of the UK Government should be given to what powers are included in common frameworks and which powers are devolved. For the Scottish and Welsh Governments, the starting point is which devolved powers should be included in common frameworks with the consent of devolved governments and legislators. It is important to stress that the bill contains no provisions in relation to common frameworks. Instead, they have been subject to discussions intergovernmentally. The committee has welcomed progress that has been made between the Scottish and UK governments in developing an approach to agreeing common frameworks. We also welcome the commitment of the UK government that common frameworks will not be imposed. But I should say also, Presiding Officer, the committee strongly believes that not only the process but the actual content of common frameworks must not be imposed. In addition, the committee strongly believes that this process is not solely a matter for governments, but must also be transparent and inclusive, enabling both this Parliament and wider stakeholders to scrutinise any agreement that is reached intergovernmentally. Presiding Officer, I want to mention briefly the Inter-Parliamentary Forum on Brexit, which brings together committee conveners and deputy conveners from the legislators across the UK which are engaged in the scrutiny of the Brexit process. Both Adam Tompkins and myself and colleagues from the European and Delegated Powers Committee attended a meeting of the Forum last week. At that meeting, we took the opportunity to stress the messages in the Finance and Constitution Committee's interim report and to stress the seriousness of the situation to colleagues and other legislators, particularly those in the House of Lords, given that the bill has now moved there. I think it's fair to say, and I hope others who were in attendance were at that meeting, to say that our message was well received. President, I'm sure you'll agree that this form of interparliamentary dialogue is a useful means of ensuring that the views of this committee and this Parliament are clearly heard during the Brexit process. So, in conclusion, the European Union Withdrawal Bill, in the view of the Finance and Constitution Committee, represents a fundamental challenge to this institution and the devolution settlement. It is imperative the UK Government takes action urgently to ensure that the bill respects the devolution settlement. Only then would the Finance and Constitution Committee be able to recommend legislative consent. I very much look forward to hearing the views of other colleagues this afternoon in this Parliament on the unanimous report that the committee produced. I move the motion in my name, Presiding Officer.